And you could do the same with loading other details, of course, by adding different source layers and just making sure that you refer to them as this layer here that it lists inside the tile sets, right? So if it's a label, it's that one. Now, of course, the type of geometry has to correspond to the type of layer that you're actually adding, and that's what we're going to go through in further sections, going over each of those types. But let's go a little more into this whole source thing, because we got a lot to do through that. So there's vector source. We've just looked at that briefly. There's a lot of different ways. You know, if you're doing something specialized, you're going to have to come in here and read it. One nice thing to note is there is a min zoom and max zoom for a lot of the sources. So if your source only works at certain zoom levels, you can force it to not render at other ones very easily by just that one call, rather than creating all kinds of zoom level rules and stuff like that. Okay, we also have this raster type, and you can see that's kind of cool. For instance, the satellites. Those images are actually images that are essentially JPEGs, and they're linked together. Whereas the cool thing about what Mapbox has done with this is that these are actually vectors. So again, you don't really have to understand the difference, really, but vectors are basically, it's a different type of data, kind of like by points, by the relationship between the points, so that it can scale to any size. Whereas an image is just a collection of pixels that, if you zoom in enough, becomes giant squares. That never happens with vectors. The relationship between the points remains the same, the distances, no matter how far in you go. So they can scale. But for certain things like satellite imagery, it's really, really hard to try to turn that into a vector. That's like, you can do it with lines and some fills like this, but with real life complex images like that, it's very difficult to do. And so instead you might need to load some things by raster. And here you can specify the size of each image. Again, if you're a specialist, you'll understand what to do with that. Some more complicated types, raster dem. There's our GeoJSON that we did before, which we literally pass it right in. And there you go. You can just load it up. You saw that already. Image, again, this is a different type of loading in an image, and this you just do directly with coordinates. So this is a very different thing. And you can do the same with video. And now we're getting into kind of different zone here of sources. So the most common type you're going to be using is either a GeoJSON or some type of vector. So I wanted to, in this video, introduce you and get you understanding why you have to add sources and why they're different than the vectors. Now, there's something interesting that if you wanted to add a source from the map you already made, so if we go all the way up to our styles, and we go back to our Mapbox course here. So this, I don't really want to load this map because it's pretty ugly, but if we were in this map and we actually wanted to reference one of these layers that we've already added into the map, we don't need to add the source separately as long as it is rendered. Now, I've mentioned rendering quite a few times, so I think you get the point, but I am going to harp on it a little more. So Mapbox only has the data that is actually appearing in this zone. When you turn, that's why these are blank for a second before they load in. And now, because of the special way that Mapbox handles things, it doesn't actually hold the data that's out here, even if you loaded it into your style. So if on the front end we were over here, and we wanted to show in a panel how many of these black shapes there are, if we landed on here from the original beginning of the map, we wouldn't be able to do it, because we wouldn't be able to find the rendered features from the map source itself, because it's not rendered, if that makes sense. We're going to see it in action a bit more, but I'm just going to keep talking about that. So in our case, we're going to just load this style in real quick. I'm going to publish it and load it, and then we're going to see if we can just get a hold of one of these styles and do something with it. So we go to Share, Develop, and Use. We get this style URL here. Head up to Mapbox. We put our style URL in the map. Okay, save that. Let's load it up. Alright, so it's loading. It takes a little while to load. The zoom's all weird. But we get everything loading in pretty much the same. And we also have our funny pink points. And we know we can, we're going to be able to bring these forward and back and maneuver them around. But here we go with our supremely ugly map. And you can see that that call to get that vector data worked on a totally different map, no problem, because it is to a URL that's separate from the source itself, from the specific map source itself. So okay, so we got this working in here. Now maybe I want, these 3D polygons to be a different color. So if I just was like, okay, I don't want to go into Studio, but I'd kind of want them to be a different color. What I can do is go to Add Layer, and I can actually refer back to the source layer that's actually in the map already. So when it comes to adding layers or dealing with things that you've already added on the map, for instance in this one that we're doing now, we've already added these layers, and we could of course pull it from the course itself, right? From that layer we could put it in the same way that we put in the URL. We could go get that course's data set URL and put it in and then refer back to the layer. But we kind of want to just refer to it immediately because it's already in our style. So can we do that? It has here this composite thing, course is the name. So maybe we can see if we can find a way to refer to this. So we just have to make sure we type it in just right. I had the lowercase one there, but figured out there's course. So we don't actually need to have this add source at all. We're referring to the composite, which is rarely told to you in the documentation, but it's really important to know. When it adds it, it actually becomes part of an underlying layer on the map that includes all the layers. So it's basically the source of this style is composite. That's what these all get grouped into. So if you ever need to refer to one of the layers on your Mapbox map, that's already added here, it's ultimately in the composite source, and then the layer. So in our case it's going to be, let's see, a fill extrusion because it's different, and fill extrusion color and fill extrusion opacity. Let's change that. Let's see what happens. Should get some pink things up there. Okay, so you can see they are there. They are underneath. Kind of funny looking, so obviously something went wrong. Maybe I didn't put this all in right. We're going to be going over the details of exactly how this is all going to work. But you can see that I am referring to the layer somehow in there. It's a little bit weird, but there's this hot pink thing going on. So I hope this makes it a little clearer what's going on when it comes to sources and layers generally around maps. We're going to be using that constantly. We're going to be also referring to existing IDs. For instance, here we're making up an ID, but sometimes you can refer to the one that's already on the map, because as you see here, we actually added another layer. We didn't modify the existing one. We just referred to the same data. But we're going to be modifying existing ones. We're going to be changing all different types of data. So I'll see you in the next section, and we'll head on doing that.